I got to the Lucas County Probate Court a half hour early because I don't like to be rushed. The benches in the hallway were polished smooth by 1,000 nervous backs. A bailiff with a kind face pointed me to the right courtroom. The door creaked. It always does. Inside smelled like paper and old coffee. The HVAC hummed. Somebody coughed into his sleeve. "Reed Jameson." My attorney waved me over. He'd put on his good Navy suit and the tie with tiny anchors. "Morning, Tom," he said low. "We'll keep it simple. Answer what's asked, nothing extra." "I can do that," I said. Across the aisle, my son Mark sat with his lawyer, a sharp woman in a gray jacket I could have never afforded. Mark had the same jawline he had at 16 when he told me he didn't need my advice about transmissions. His hair was barber short the way mortgage guys wear it. Kara wasn't there, which was either mercy or strategy. The clerk arranged files at the front table. She had a Buckeyes mug that read, "Best Aunt." The judge's chair sat empty under the state seal. I kept my hands flat on my knees and looked at the wood grain. Years back when the house got quiet after Evelyn died, I learned you can calm yourself by naming what you see: bench, grain, scuff mark, brass hinge. "All rise," the bailiff said. And we did. Judge Annette Morales came in with a stack of papers and the tight smile of someone who'd already heard too much for 1 week. We sat when she sat. The microphones clicked. A reporter from somewhere local slid into the back row with a notepad. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was going to be something. "Case number 2025 PG 1142 in RE guardianship of Thomas Whitman," the clerk read. Judge Morales looked at each table. "Good morning. Appearances for the record." "Reed Jameson for Mr. Whitman," Reed said. "Paige Kessler for petitioner. Mark Whitman," the gray jacket woman said. Mark didn't look at me. He looked at the judge like she was a lender and he had a hot deal. He touched the knot of his tie and squared his shoulders. "Ms. Kessler," the judge said, "your petition asks for full guardianship of person and estate. On what basis?" Paige stood. "Your Honor, we'll show persistent cognitive decline, financial mismanagement, and inability to maintain basic safety. My client has acted in good faith to protect his father." I felt Reed's hand on the table between us, not touching just there. "Very well," the judge said. "Call your first witness." Paige called Mark. He walked to the stand like he owned it, lifted his right hand, swore to tell the truth, and took a seat. The microphone picked up his breath. "State your name for the record." "Mark Andrew Whitman." "Relation to the proposed ward." "He's my father." "Describe his recent functioning," Paige said. Mark folded his hands. I saw the cufflinks Kara bought him for Christmas, little silver rectangles that caught the light. He leaned in. He's a decent man, but he's failing. He forgets bills. He doubles medication. He leaves the stove on. He can't keep up the house. He wanders. Reed rose. Objection to narrative. "Sustained," the judge said. "Ms. Kessler, break it down." Paige nodded. "Mr. Whitman, in the last year has your father held steady employment?" Mark smiled with half his mouth. I knew that smile. The one he used on homecoming night when he said he was just going to study at the lake. "No," he said into the mic. "He hasn't held real work in years. He never really did. He just drifted. Odd jobs. He wasted his life." It came out cleaner than I expected, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. The words hung there. You could feel the room lean toward them. I heard someone suck air through teeth. The reporter's pen flicked. The judge looked over her glasses, not at me, but at Mark. She didn't say anything right away. She let the words sit on the table between us the way a mechanic lays out a bent bolt. "Anything else regarding employment?" Paige asked. Mark shrugged. "He never had real work, Your Honor. He was never anything. There are a lot of things a man can say that won't kill you, but will go right through you first." I kept my eyes on the wood grain. Bench, grain, scuff mark, brass hinge. I thought about the time Mark was 9 and his bike chain snapped on Front Street and I trotted him in the bike the whole way home. I thought about the years he didn't call on holidays and how I told myself he was busy. I thought about how easy it is to be angry and how hard it is to stay quiet. Reed leaned toward my ear. "Breathe," he said. "We'll answer with paper." Paige put up a handful of exhibits, a late fee on a utility bill I'd mailed the next day, a pharmacy note about a refilled timing error, an urgent care visit where I'd sprained a wrist lifting salt bags. It looked messy in a stack. On their own, those things were just life. Your witness, Paige said. Reed stood and walked closer to the stand like he was approaching a skittish dog. Mr. Whitman, your father's mortgage, is it current? I don't know, Mark said. Insurance. I don't car handles. Utilities. I've seen late notices. Reed held up a sheaf. Receipts. All current. Your father's last eye exam. He glanced at me. Doctor notes cognitive function intact for age. Any reason you didn't include that? Paige said, objection argumentative. Sustained, the judge said, but she let the paper stay on the edge of her bench like a reminder. Reed kept his voice steady. Mr. Whitman, did you ever ask your father directly about his past employment? Mark swallowed. He never told me anything. Did you ask? I asked why he didn't try for more. Mark said too quick. Why he never... Thank you, Reed said. No further questions. Mark stepped down a little slower than he'd gone up. He sat without looking at me. He adjusted the cufflinks again. Reed called me. I swore and sat and tried not to lean too close to the microphone. Reed asked simple things. Mr. Whitman, do you manage your own medications? Yes, I said. I use a weekly box. The pharmacist at ProMedica helped me set it up. Do you cook clean pay bills? I don't cook much, I said, and a few people laughed soft. But I keep up with what needs doing. I pay the bills when they come. Any falls, fires, evictions? No, sir? Paige cross-examined. She didn't smile. Mr. Whitman, have you been unemployed for long stretches? I did work that didn't come with business cards, I said. I had enough. What kind of work? The kind you don't put in a Christmas letter, I said. Non-responsive Paige said, Your Honor, I move to strike. Stricken, the judge said. Mr. Whitman, please answer only what's asked. Yes, ma'am, I said. I held jobs as needed. Maintenance courier night shift. Nothing steady, Paige said, like a period. Nothing I talked about, I said. Paige lifted a paper. Do you recognize this overdue notice? That one came. I mailed the check the next day, I said. The credit showed the following week. No further questions, she said. Reed stood again. He didn't look at me when he asked the next one. He looked at the judge. Mr. Whitman, if the court needed to understand your capacity, is there anything you would ask the court to review? I felt the room tip. I kept my hands flat. Only what the court decides is proper, I said. I'm not here to make noise. Reed nodded like we'd practiced a dance, nothing further. We sat. The judge took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She glanced down at the case file. There was a manila envelope clipped inside with a red sticker. I'd seen one like it once. The clerk slid it closer. The judge didn't open it. She just rested her hand on it like it might slide away. Counsel, she said to both tables, capacity is the issue before the court. I have certain materials under seal that may or may not be relevant to that question. I will review them in camera if needed. Paige started to speak. The judge held up a hand. I'm not inviting argument. I'm stating where we are. The bailiff checked the clock. The HVAC clicked louder and then quieted. Someone in the back row shifted and the bench squealed. I could feel the reporter watching me the way a person watches a bridge wondering if it'll hold. We'll reconvene after lunch, the judge said. 1:30. Do not discuss the matter in the hallway. Mr. Whitman, she looked at me. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, I said. We stood when she stood. All rise, the bailiff said again, and we did. Mark walked out fast, his lawyer close to his shoulder. Reed took his time packing his legal pad. He leaned toward me as the room thinned. If it comes to it, he said just above a whisper, we can ask her to open the envelope. I heard, I said. We sat there a second longer, just two old men at a table listening to the hum and the scrape and the little noises a courthouse makes. I put my hand flat on the wood. Bench, grain, scuff mark, brass hinge. I breathed. Lunch would taste like cardboard. That was fine. We'd be back at 1:30. The house isn't much to look at from the road. Ranch style, one-story aluminum storm door that clicks if you don't catch it. The lawn goes a little yellow in August and a little swampy in April. I keep it cut when it needs it and leave it alone when it doesn't. The mailbox leans a hair to the left because the snowplow clipped it 2 winters ago, and I told myself I'd fix it in May. It's September now. I'll get there. Inside the kitchen is where I live. Formica table with a cigarette burn from the people who had the place before me. A magnet strip on the fridge with clippings under it. Meijer circulars a big boy coupon that expires next week. A Kroger receipt with, "Thank you, Thomas," faded to a ghost. The percolator sits on the counter, dented on one side from a move 15 years back. It still works the same as it did the day I bought it at Sears. It makes coffee that tastes like coffee. I sat down and poured a mug. Black, no sugar. The cup read, "Rudy's Hot Dogs" in red letters. I'd picked it up at a fundraiser. The handle gets warm right where your thumb lands. The radio on the windowsill was tuned to AM Sports Talk low. A guy from Sandusky was calling in to say the Buckeyes' offensive line was better than folks thought. I let him ramble. I've learned people need to hear themselves say a thing before they change their mind about it. On the wall by the back door, there's a pegboard I hung myself. WD-40 a tape, measure a roll of blue painter's tape, 3 screwdrivers, and a little level with a bubble that drifts if you stare at it too long. The mower handle is wrapped with duct tape where the foam split. When the pull cord sticks, I lay the mower on its side and talk to it like a stubborn animal. It listens about half the time. If you walked through my place, you'd say this man lives alone and keeps things tidy enough. You wouldn't say what he does. People think they know a life by the look of the kitchen sink. They don't. On the counter next to the sink is my pill organizer, Monday through Sunday morning and night. I set it out on Sundays with a legal pad open beside me. Blood pressure, cholesterol, the little vitamin D my doctor says won't hurt. I check them off with a pencil because pencil erases and pen doesn't. I write small. It's a habit from writing on my knee in cars that didn't belong to me. There's a cigar box in the cabinet above the stove. No cigars, envelopes. I label them with a Sharpie mortgage, gas, electric, phone, church, VFW. Each envelope has cash in it, not a lot, but enough to cover what it's for. I learned that from a guy at the plant who got through the 1980 strike without a single late fee. He said you can't spend what you already gave away to the bill. He wasn't wrong. I keep a small stack of photographs in a shoebox under the bed. Not many. I'm not a scrapbook man. There's one of Evelyn at Mommy Bay, wind in her hair mouth open mid-laugh, because I'd said something about the gulls acting like little old ladies at a rummage sale. The edges have gone soft. There's one of Mark fishing off the side of the pier with a line too heavy for the bluegill he meant to catch, and me kneeling beside him explaining why gear matters. He was 8, maybe 9. He listened then. On the kitchen table that morning before the first hearing, I laid out the papers. Reed asked for mortgage receipts, the insurance declaration page, the eye exam printout from UTMC, the pharmacy sheet for the pill box, the fire alarm inspection note the guy from the township left last month. I put a paperclip on each set and stacked them into one folder the color of oatmeal. I slid a Post-it to the top that read, "Court Capacity." I don't like a mess in front of a judge. The phone buzzed near the sink. Unknown caller. I let it go. It buzzed again, left a voicemail. I poured more coffee and hit play on speaker. "Tom," a woman's voice said. She spoke in a way like she'd said the same sentence 100 different times to 100 different people and knew how much to give and how much to hold back. If capacity becomes the issue on the record, we can pursue limited clearance for service summaries, only if necessary. Call back if you need to. Block number will work. She didn't say a name. She didn't have to. I wiped the coffee ring off the counter with the side of my hand and set the mug down again, same spot. In the living room, there's a small bookcase with a picture frame in the back corner where nobody looks. The frame is turned face down. I picked it up and turned it over. It's a Polaroid from the 90s, colors gone a little sickly me in a shirt that didn't fit quite right, shaking hands with a man you'd recognize younger than you know him now. The dateline at the bottom is smudged. I don't remember if that was sweat or rain. We were outside of Detroit. I flipped the frame back down and set it where it was. People think I didn't work. I worked at night when the plant whistles blew and most of the city slept. I worked inside cars I didn't own and on phone numbers that weren't mine. I worked as a man who carried packages labeled parts and as a man who had keys to rooms he shouldn't need keys to. I was a janitor when I needed to be a mechanic, when that fit better a courier who knew which side streets stayed dark. The thing with work like that is you can't take it to show and tell. Fathers at school put on neckties and handed out business cards. I stapled posters for the pancake breakfast at church and kept my mouth shut. Evelyn knew some, not all. Enough to look at me on hard days and say, "You're home." That's the only part I need. When she got sick, I asked for fewer overnights and somehow it happened. There are ways things happen when you've been useful long enough. After she passed, the house felt loud and empty at the same time. I filled it with small noise, AM radio, the percolator, the washer thumping on the spin cycle. People brought casseroles and asked me if I had help. I said I was fine. Sometimes I was. When Mark grew into a man, he stepped into a world that paid in smiles and handshakes and called you by your first name across a desk. He liked the clean weight of a new briefcase. He liked numbers that added up right now. I didn't fault him for that. We need those men the same way we need men who carry boxes in the middle of the night and don't drop them. It isn't easy to be proud of a father you can't explain. I can grant him that. But there's a line between not understanding and making a story that hurts. When he sat in that courtroom and said I never had real work, I could hear the years between us crack like ice. The door at the back of the house rattled. That meant Buddy came in without knocking. He's the only one who does that. He yelled Tom like the house might have changed since last time. "In here," I said. "Buddy Ramirez is 75 and walks like a coyote, got his ankle but didn't keep it. Vietnam, he'll tell you if you ask. He won't tell you much else. He had on his VFW cap with pins on one side, and he carried a bakery box that smelled like sugar. Church lady gave me too many," he said, setting the box on the table. "Powdered donuts, 3 missing." He brushed his hands together and left a white line across the table edge. "You ready for today?" "As I'll be," I said. He tapped the percolator, then found a mug and poured, without asking. "Saw your boy's car over at your place the other day," he said, not looking at me, just tearing a donut in half so the powder fell on his shirt. Didn't wave. "He was in a rush," I said. Buddy snorted. "Men in a rush forget their manners." He chewed, swallowed, washed it down with coffee. "You want me to sit in the back row and make the room look better? You got better things to do than watch paper change hands." "Maybe I don't," he said. He slid his hand into his pocket and set something small on the table. A coin heavy for its size with an emblem on it. The edges were worn slick where a thumb might worry it in quiet moments. "Carry it if today feels long." I didn't touch it. "You sure?" He shrugged. "I carried it enough." He nodded at the radio. "Turn that loudmouth off. You'll fry your brain listening to people who sound sure about everything." I clicked the dial. The silence after talk radio sounds like a towel thrown over a barking dog. The house fell back into its normal noises. The fridge motor, the tick of the cooling stove, the percolator settling. Buddy wiped his fingers with a napkin and stood. "You want a ride?" "I'll drive," I said. "I like to park where I can see the door." He looked at me like I'd said something interesting, then didn't say anything about it. "I'll see you there," he said. He picked up the cap, put it back on, and went out the back way, closing the door, soft. When the door clicked, I put the coin in my pocket. It sat there like a small word you don't say out loud. I washed the coffee mug, set it to dry on the rack, wiped the counter again, because I'd left a ring, and put the percolator back in its place on the counter. I ran a cloth over the table and got the powdered sugar Buddy left. I straightened the stack of papers and slid the Post-it down so it stuck better. Before I left, I went to the bedroom and pulled the shoebox out. I didn't open it. I put it back. I went to the little bookcase and turned the picture frame face up, looked at the Polaroid one more second, then turned it down again. Habit is a fence. You don't kick it just because you can. On my way out the door, the phone buzzed again. The same blocked number, no voicemail this time. I thumbed back a single word and hit send. Understood. The afternoon would be fluorescent lights and microphone feedback, and the long patience judges expect from people who don't have much practice at patience. It would be my son in a suit he earned, and me in a jacket that fit because I bought it in person and not online. It would be paper and names in a manila envelope with a red sticker that might stay closed and might not. I locked the back door, tested the handle, and checked the stove knobs a second time because I always do. Out on the porch, the air smelled like leaves gone wet. A neighbor across the street dragged a trash can to the curb and waved with 2 fingers. I waved back. I got in the truck, set the folder on the passenger seat, and patted it once like it was a dog that needed settling. When I turned the key, the radio came back on for a second before I clicked it off. The Buckeyes guy was still talking. I backed out, slow, looking both ways, even though I live on a quiet street. At the corner, I stopped and looked in the rearview mirror. The mailbox leaned left, like always. The house sat where it has always sat. If you drove by, you'd say nothing special. You'd be right, and you wouldn't. I put the truck in drive and headed toward downtown. The courthouse would be waiting. So would the envelope. And when a thing has been sealed long enough, the weight of it is not the paper. It's the years. After the morning session, Mark texted lunch talk options. He picked Tony Paco's because he knows I don't turn down a chili dog. We met at the booth by the window, with the autographed hot dog buns in frames on the wall. The glass case of pickles made the whole place smell the way it always has. A server set down 2 waters and a basket of crackers without asking. I took off my cap and slid it beside me. Mark wore his office smile. Daddy said this is all getting bigger than it needs to be. Kara slid into the booth next to him, a folder on her lap. We're worried, she said before the menus even touched the table. We love you. This is about safety. The server came back. I ordered a Paco dog with mustard and onions. Mark ordered a grilled chicken, something he'd pretend tasted fine. Kara said she wasn't hungry. When the menus were gone, Kara put a listing agreement on the table, turned so the signature line faced me. We found a perfect place, assisted living, full services. This gets you top dollar for the house before winter slows the market. I looked at the top right corner. Exclusive, right to sell. I read the broker's name, the rate, the term. You brought a pen. Kara smiled like she was on a daytime show about organizing closets. Of course. Mark leaned forward. Dad, I'm tapped out trying to manage this. You leave the stove on. I don't, I said. You forget bills. I don't, I said. Kara touched his sleeve. Let's be constructive. Quick check just so we all feel okay. She opened a printed worksheet with internet font and little boxes. What day is it? Tuesday. Month. September. Where are we? Paco's, I said. Toledo. Who's the president? I told her. She blinked. Spell world backwards. DLROW. She flipped to another page. Subtract 7 from 100 by 7s. I did it until she nodded and stopped me. The server set down the food. Mark tore open a mustard packet and squeezed it without looking. Dad, he said softer, nobody's calling you a bad person. We just need control. So nothing falls through the cracks. Kara slid a second paper over. Durable power of attorney. The signature line winked the way a shallow ditch looks flat until you step in it. I ate my hot dog. The onions were sharp. When I'd finished, I sipped water and wiped my hands. I'll take these, I said, folding both forms and show Reed. Kara's mouth flattened. Lawyers make things adversarial. Lawyers read fine print, I said. Mark set his hands flat on the table like he'd learned in a workshop. Dad, I've been covering gaps. You don't see it because I don't make you feel bad about it. What gaps, I said. He opened his mouth and closed it. Just gaps. We paid at the register. Mark fished around like he'd forgotten his wallet. I let him. Outside, the sun had a pale halo in it. The weatherman says means rain 2 days from now. Mark walked me to my truck. Bring the papers back signed, he said. It'll be easier. It usually is, I said and got in. That evening, I drove by Mark's cul-de-sac because I felt like a man who kept missing something obvious. His garage door was up. Inside, leaned against a rake and a bag of grass seed, I saw a realtor yard sign with his brokerage's name on it, still wrapped in plastic. A set of zip ties hung off one corner like streamers. I pulled to the curb and rolled down the window. Mark came out, phone to his ear, smiled like I'd arrived to help him move a couch. He ended the call with a thumb. Hey, good timing. Did you bring your debit card? I can run to the ATM and grab cash for the electric. The electric's on auto pay, I said. He blinked, then laughed like we were trading jokes. Right, I mean the water. Also auto pay, I said. He scratched his eyebrow. The realtor sign looked at me with its rapt blank face. I'll handle the bills, he said. You just take it easy. Bring the forms tomorrow. Kara already booked a tour. I'll let Reed read them, I said. Dad, he said, and he worked the word like taffy. I'm trying to stop you from getting taken advantage of. I appreciate it, I said. Let's make sure neither of us is. His smile cracked at one corner. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, and meant something. Back home, I took out my bank statements and went line by line with a pen. Most entries sat where I'd put them: fuel at Speedway Kroger Church. Then there were small ATM withdrawals, all the same, 2 machines, both near Mark's office, on days I remembered being in my kitchen or mowing. $40, $60, $40, $60, not enough to notice unless you were looking. I circled them and wrote the dates in the margin. When you spend your life tracking patterns, you don't forget how. I called Reed. "Bring the statements in the morning," he said. "We'll make copies. You've got receipts for the bills." "In envelopes," I said. "Good," he said. Paper crackled on his end. "I want a letter from your pharmacist about the pill organizer, a note from your eye doctor on cognitive function, and an affidavit from someone who sees you manage daily tasks. Neighbor church VFW, simple sworn statements." "I'll ask Buddy," I said. "Perfect," Reed said. "Also, heads up, judge is signaling she may allow limited federal materials if capacity stays at issue." The line went quiet in my ear, like it was waiting to see what I'd do. "If it's needed," I said. "Only if," Reed said. The next morning I stopped at ProMedica Pharmacy. The tech with the purple glasses recognized me. "Mr. Whitman, you're the tidy pillbox guy." She printed out a letter while I waited, detailing how she'd helped me set up the weekly organizer and watched me demonstrate it back to her last month. She added a line about me asking appropriate questions and understanding dosage changes. She signed it and stamped it with their little notary seal that clicks like a stapler. She handed it over like it was a report card. "Gold star," she said. At UTMC, I waited behind 2 people for the optometry desk. The receptionist remembered my ball cap. The doctor came out between patients, read the request Reed had faxed, and wrote 2 sentences in doctor handwriting about memory attention and problem solving being normal for age at my last appointment. He used words like intact and no evidence. He shook my hand like he meant it. At home, I printed the utilities ledger from the online portal. Dates, amounts, 0 balances. I laid them out in a row and took a photo with the date visible in the corner in case anyone wanted to say I'd doctored anything. Old habits. I walked the Pearson Metro Park path after lunch to clear my head. A goose hissed at a toddler. A sign said, "Do not feed waterfowl," and someone had written jerks in pen under it with an arrow to the geese. The mommy looked brown and patient. Buddy came up from behind me, steps scuffing the gravel cap low. "You hungry?" he said. "Always," I said. We split a hot pretzel from the cart and drank paper cups of lemonade that had more sugar than lemon. I told him I needed a statement simple. He said I can say what I see and listed it: me mowing, shoveling, hauling the trash, driving myself to appointments, reminding him about his wallet when he leaves it on the pew. "I can swear it," he said. "I don't swear lightly." He wrote it that afternoon at his kitchen table. His wife slid the paper toward him and tapped the blank lines. He printed careful, like a man carving letters into wet cement. We took it to Carol at the UPS store to notarize, and she said, "You too," again, and stamped it with authority that made the paper feel heavier. Back at my place, I stacked everything: pharmacist letter, I-note, utilities, ledger, Buddy's affidavit, mortgage and insurance receipts, photos of the smoke detectors with fresh batteries, the cognitive worksheet Kara used with my answers, scribbled in the margin just to amuse myself. I tucked the circled bank statement pages into a separate manila folder labeled withdrawals. I sat a minute with the phone in my hand and dialed the blocked number that had left the first voicemail. It rang once and clicked. "Go ahead," a woman said. "Capacity is still the issue," I said. "The judge may open a little." "Understood," she said. "We'll be present in gallery if the court requests context. Limited scope. Names redacted. You'll be fine." The line clicked dead. No goodbye. The house went back to the sound the fridge makes when it tries hard. The next morning at Reed's office, the copier made a noise like a car door that wants oil. He lined up the piles, squared the corners, hole-punched the right side because he said left punches make judges lose their place. He slid 2 sets into thick exhibit sleeves and clipped a cover page on with the case caption. "Page will try to make everything you do look like luck," he said. "This reads like a man who lives his life on purpose." He looked up over his reading glasses. "You okay?" "Been worse," I said. He smiled half an inch. "I like worse. Worse means you know how to stand up." On his desk calendar, the judge's assistant had penciled in, "Whitman continued," for Thursday 1st, 30 p.m. That was sooner than I'd told myself it would be. Reed tapped the square with his pen. Court's moving quicker than usual. You rattled someone. We walked out to the hall. The cleaning woman buffed the linoleum with a machine that hummed like a low airplane. Paperwork in my arm felt like a small toolbox. Buddy's coin in my pocket felt like a promise. At the door, Reed said, "If capacity is their hill to die on, the judge will unseal limited records. It won't say what you did, just that you did it for a long time, under rules that don't make sense to people who sell houses on weekends." "Good," I said. "You sure?" he said. "I'm sure," I said, "if it keeps the peace later." He nodded. Then we let the truth in just enough to do its job. I drove home by the long way. WTOL 11 had a van parked by the courthouse lawn. The driver sat with the door open eating a sandwich feet on the curb. A man in a neon vest blew leaves into a tidy pile, and the wind blew them back out, and he started over. That looked about right. At my kitchen table, I wrote 3 lines on a yellow pad and tore them off and put them in my wallet in the slot where a person keeps a picture of a grandkid. The lines were for me, not for court. Pay what you owe. Tell the truth when asked. Keep your hands steady. I said them once out loud because I like how words feel when they get air. Then I packed the exhibits in order and set them by the door, and I slept like a man who knows what tomorrow's for. Day 2, same hallway, same benches polished by nerves. I got there early again because being early is a way to feel useful. Reed showed up with a banker's box and a styrofoam cup that left a wet ring on the file he set down. He wiped it with his sleeve and smiled. "Ready to be boring," he said. "Judges love boring." "Best thing I do," I said. We went in. The HVAC hummed a little higher than yesterday, like the building was thinking hard. The clerk had swapped to a different Ohio State mug. This one said, "Eat 'em up." A couple of faces I didn't know sat in the gallery suits that looked rented, folks who came to court the way people used to go to train stations just to see what rolled through. "All rise." We did. Judge Morales took the bench with a thin stack of orders clipped together. We sat, microphones clicked alive. Paige straightened a blue tab in her case file and lifted her chin. Mark stared at the table, then at me, then away. Kara had come today and sat 2 rows back with a tote bag in her lap. She looked like a person who keeps lists about other people. "Ms. Kessler," the judge said, "continue." Paige called a nurse from urgent care to talk about my sprained wrist visit. The nurse wore clean scrubs and held her hands folded the way you do when you're not sure what to do with them. She testified I showed up alone, said I'd lifted a salt bag wrong, rated my pain as 4. She said my blood pressure was fine, my gait normal, my affect appropriate. She mentioned I asked if I could still mow. He wanted to finish the job, she said, half a smile, like she couldn't help it. Paige tried to stretch it. "Did he seem confused?" "No," the nurse said. "Forgetful?" "No." Paige thanked her and moved on to a pharmacy refill note where a tech had marked a timing error, refilled a week early. "Evidence of mismanagement," Paige said. Reed rose. "Or evidence of a proactive patient," he said, holding up the pharmacist's letter. "Your Honor, Exhibit B, the pharmacy's own statement that Mr. Whitman uses a weekly organizer, demonstrated proper use and asked questions any careful patient would ask." He offered it to the clerk. Foundation laid by their own record. Page objection hearsay. "Read business record exception, 8036. Judge Morales admitted. Page put on photos close shots of a chipped stair tread, a smoke detector with the battery door open, a sink with dishes from the night before. She framed them like a realtor would frame a feature you don't want buyers to notice. "Unsafe conditions," she said. Reed didn't bother looking at me. "Exhibit C," he said. "Smoke detector with new battery photo with timestamp from yesterday. Exhibit D, stair tread repaired. Exhibit E, letter from the township inspector stating alarms passed last month." He slid them forward like cards in a game no one wanted to play. "And Your Honor, we'd remind the court the guardianship statute is a last resort, least restrictive alternative applies." The judge nodded once, making a note. "Ms. Kessler, I'll be weighing least restrictive means." Paige pinched her lips and moved to bank statements. She had a printout that looked like mine but not. "There are multiple cash withdrawals," she said, suggesting disorganization. She hovered her finger over the lines. Reed stood with a small sound the chair makes when an old back pushes it away. "Exhibit F," he said. Mr. Whitman's marked statements. The withdrawals Ms. Kessler points to came from ATMs next to petitioner's office on days Mr. Whitman's own ledger puts him at home. He didn't look at Mark when he said it. He didn't have to. We reserve the right to request a financial review. For now, it goes to why a full guardianship is unnecessary and frankly dangerous in petitioner's hands. Page objection to innuendo. Judge sustained as to tone. The court can read locations and dates. Move on. Page called a neighbor. Not Buddy, another one 2 houses down who'd waved at me for years and never learned my name. He said I'd asked him once which day trash was picked up. He said I walked the wrong can to the curb. Reed stood. You don't know Mr. Whitman's trash schedule, do you? No, the neighbor said. You don't know his name? Tom, he said after a pause, glancing at me like he was asking if he'd gotten it right. Thank you, Reed said. No further questions. Page tried to get the neighbor to say my lights were on late. He said he went to bed early and couldn't say. She thanked him and sat. Reed called Buddy. Buddy wore his one good shirt and his VFW cap because he said he felt like himself with it on. He held the rail when he walked to the stand, not because he had to, but because he remembered a time when he hadn't. He swore in and sat and put his hands flat, the way men who've been through things put their hands when they tell the truth. Mr. Ramirez Reed said, how often do you see Mr. Whitman? Couple times a week, Buddy said. More when the fish are biting or the snow is falling. What do you see him do? Mow his lawn, change a tire, carry salt. Set out his pillbox on Sundays. He talks to himself when he does it. Says the days under his breath so he doesn't stack 2 Wednesdays. He drives himself to the pharmacy. He reminded me about my wallet last Easter. He fixed my back gate and didn't charge me, which I told him was un-American. The room laughed a little. He reads little print without squinting. He doesn't leave the stove on. There's a scorch on his counter from before he bought the house. People keep taking pictures of that like it's news. Page stood. Mr. Ramirez, you're his friend. Yes, Buddy said. So you're biased. I'm accurate, Buddy said. Do you know his finances? I know he puts cash in envelopes with names on them, and I told him that was smarter than anything I've done lately. Do you know his medical conditions? I know he takes pills out of the box like a man who wants to keep waking up on purpose. No further questions, Page said quicker than she meant to. Reed offered Buddy's affidavit. The judge took it like it was made of regular paper and not the kind that makes a body feel held. Page tried a different angle. She called Kara. Kara walked to the stand like it had been waiting for her. She swore in and crossed her ankles under the chair. She testified about my confusion at a family picnic when I asked where the plastic cups were, and they were right there. She testified about me double buying a socket set and returning one. She testified about wandering because she'd once seen me walk around the block without my phone. Reed stood. Ms. Whitman, do you live with Mr. Whitman? No, she said. Do you manage his checkbook? No. Are you a doctor? No. Are you a pharmacist? No. Thank you, he said. No further questions. Kara stayed in the chair a second too long, then stood and returned to her tote bag where she dug for something that wasn't there. Reed put up the last of our paper, the I note with intact and no evidence in doctor letters. The pharmacist's letter, the utilities ledger, the mortgage and insurance receipts, photos of smoke detectors with bright batteries, a receipt for a new stair tread. He didn't make a speech. He just built a small, steady wall out of normal life and left it standing. The judge leaned back. All right, she said. The standard for a full guardianship is not inconvenience to the family. It is clear and convincing evidence that the proposed ward is incapable of taking care of himself and his affairs. The court must also consider less restrictive alternatives. Page stood half an inch. Your Honor, the pattern. The pattern, I see, the judge said, is a man who functions with systems. She looked down at the file and rested her palm on the manila envelope with the red sticker. Capacity remains your issue, Ms. Kessler. You've made it so. Page said, careful now. Your Honor, we maintain that the lack of steady employment history supports our petition. Mr. Whitman has not shown any coherent work record. That goes to executive function. Reed didn't move. He didn't have to. The judge tapped the envelope with 2 fingers the way you tap a bar to get the barkeep's attention. I have certain materials under seal, she said, submitted by the Department of Justice in response to the court's inquiry. I will review them in camera to the extent they bear on present capacity. Page tried softly, objection to relevance. If sustained work of a certain complexity is demonstrated, the judge said, not looking up, relevance is plain. The court will take a brief recess. Counsel will remain available. She stood, we stood, all rise. As we gathered our papers, I noticed a woman in a plain navy blazer slip into the back row and sit with a slim briefcase on her knees. She had the posture of someone who didn't need a badge to be believed. She looked at the bench, not at me. I didn't recognize her. I recognized the shoes sensible government built for hallways. Reed leaned close. DOJ liaison, he said under his breath. Name's Shelby Collins. It means the judge is serious. Buddy in the second row tipped his chin at me like a man who'd seen a storm roll in and decided to let it rain. Mark stared at the envelope as if staring could keep it closed. Kara put a hand on his forearm. He slid it away without thinking, then put it back because he knew people were watching. The bailiff called 10 minutes to no one in particular. The room filled with the small noises of recess, chair legs, a zipper, a cough, a peppermint being unwrapped like paper might be a sin. The clerk slid the envelope closer to the judge's side of the bench and set a letter opener beside it. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. Reed stacked our exhibits, squared the corners, and exhaled through his nose. This is where we let the process do what it does, he said. I nodded. I put my palm flat on the table. Bench, grain, scuff mark, brass hinge. I kept my hand steady. The manila looked like any other envelope. It wasn't. The judge reached toward it, then stopped to sip water. She set the cup down with care. When she lifted the letter opener, the room went so quiet you could hear the HVAC click from cool to idle. Recess ran 10 minutes on the clock and 30 in my body. When the bailiff called us back, the room settled like gravel in a jar. Judge Morales took the bench with the manila envelope, now open flap, folded back neat as a shirt collar. A thin stack sat beside it, pages clipped black bars where names ought to be. All right, she said, voice even. The court has conducted an in-camera review. Certain materials are relevant to present capacity and will be addressed in a limited way on the record. Page rose a quarter inch. Your Honor, we renew our objection to relevance and prejudice under 403. Noted and overruled, the judge said. Capacity is the issue you've placed before me. Sustained long-term complex functioning bears directly. She turned to the back row. Is the department's liaison present? The woman in the plain navy blazer stood. Shelby Collins, Your Honor. Her voice had the tired calm of airports and fluorescent lights. She carried the slim briefcase to the front like it weighed exactly what it should. Ms. Collins, the judge said, you're sworn. The court will narrowly define the scope. Shelby raised a hand, swore, and sat. She set the briefcase on her knees instead of the table. People who carry things for a living keep them close. State your position. Senior Liaison, Department of Justice, Office of Protective Disclosures, she said. I coordinate court responses when sealed federal work intersects with local proceedings. Page slid a legal pad forward. Objection to foundation. Reed didn't look up. She just laid it. Overruled, the judge said. Ms. Collins, the court will not permit operational specifics, locations, or identities. You may authenticate summaries and characterize work only to the degree necessary. Yes, Your Honor. The judge tapped the clipped pages. Exhibit G, court's copy. We'll mark a redacted version for the parties. The clerk took a duplicate with more black than white and handed it down. Page looked at it like a menu in a language she didn't speak. Reed read the top line, then folded his hands. Ms. Collins, the judge said, is the individual before the court. Mr. Thomas Whitman, the same person referenced in these summaries. Yes, Shelby said. Identity confirmed through internal indices and retired personnel attestations. Page objection, hearsay within hearsay. Reed admissible for the limited purpose the court identified. Judge overruled as to the narrow purpose of establishing work history, complexity relevant to capacity. The court is not making findings on any criminal matters or third-party conduct. Shelby went on steady. The summaries reflect that Mr. Whitman served in a covert human intelligence support role for an aggregate of 33 years under varied civilian covers, maintenance, courier, janitorial contractor. Duties included source handling assistance, pretext logistics, and discrete observation in industrial and transportation settings. The room didn't breathe for a second. Someone's chair squeaked, then decided not to. Page tried again. Relevance. Counsel. The judge said we're addressing the petitioner's claim that Mr. Whitman never held real work and lacks executive function. Sustained service of this type over decades speaks for itself. Page pressed, were there performance concerns that would indicate cognitive decline? Shelby didn't look at me. If there were, he would not have remained in role. Objection speculative. Page said. Overruled, the judge said. The witness may testify to general retention standards. Shelby kept it dry. Retention in those assignments requires sustained memory judgment pattern, recognition, and adherence to protocol over long periods. Reed didn't smile. He just clicked his pen and didn't write anything. Dates, the judge said. Shelby checked a line. Active periods include 1991, 2001, 2003, 2014, 2016, 2020, with gaps consistent with cover and personal circumstances. Page seized on it. Gaps, so unemployment. Cover isn't unemployment, Shelby said. No edge in it. It's cover. The court reporter looked up like she wanted that sentence to land right on the page. She asked Shelby to slow down. Shelby repeated it exactly the same. Reed stood for one question. Ms. Collins, without names or operations, can you state whether Mr. Whitman received commendations related to this work? Yes, Shelby said. 2 letters from U.S. attorneys acknowledging exceptional assistance resulting in prosecutions. 1 internal commendation for risk tolerance within protocol, all redacted for parties. Page objection prejudicial character evidence. Judge overruled to the limited capacity purpose. The court will not let this devolve. Shelby folded her hands. I can add that Mr. Whitman repeatedly declined awards that would have made his role public. That wasn't in any paper. That was from a voice on a line I'd known longer than I care to say. My ears hummed. I kept my eyes on the wood grain, bench, grain, scuff mark, brass hinge. Page regrouped. Ms. Collins, did Mr. Whitman work with weapons? Beyond scope, the judge said firm. We are not trying a movie. Laughter rubbed the edges of a few throats and then died as it should in a courtroom. Page tried a last angle. Is it possible Mr. Whitman's recollection of his own history is unreliable due to the secrecy of his prior work? Shelby considered the judge, not Page. Mr. Whitman's recollection is constrained by classification, as is mine. That is not the same as unreliability. The judge nodded once. Thank you, Ms. Collins. You may step back, but please remain available. Shelby returned to the back row briefcase still on her knees. She didn't look at me. I appreciated that more than looking. Reed rose with a slim stack. Your Honor, to pair with Exhibit G, Exhibit H, public non-sensitive corroborants. He laid them out like fence pickets. Hazard differential pay stubs, travel vouchers and WD-2s from shell contractors, dates aligning with years petitioner calls unemployed, names redacted or replaced as per DOJ instruction. Page objected on everything she could count: foundation, authentication, hearsay. Reed walked her through each predicate like a man going step by step down basement stairs he'd built himself. The judge admitted them limited purpose again, repeating it for the record the way you repeat your address to an operator so the ambulance goes to the right house. Kara twisted the strap of her tote bag until the leather looked like chewed gum. Mark held still, like stillness could push the tide back. Buddy, second row, watched the judge the way you watch a fuse calm until it isn't. Reed didn't make a speech. He knew when paper spoke better than a mouth. He offered one last exhibit, bank statements with my circles and dates, and requested quietly a referral for financial review of petitioner's handling of respondents' accounts. Page sputtered. Your Honor, retaliatory? Enough, the judge said. The court said it would read dates and locations itself. The referral is not a sanction, it's a safeguard. She stacked the exhibits, squared the corners like Reed does, and set her palm on them as if to keep them from sliding off into noise. When she spoke next, she looked at Mark, then at me, then at the empty space between us where a lot of years had sat. The petition before me asks that this court declare a 70-year-old man incapable and place his person and estate under another's control, she said. The evidence shows a man who manages his life with systems, who keeps appointments, asks appropriate questions, and pays what he owes. The evidence further shows that for 3 decades and change, he performed sustained complex tasks under conditions that would unmake a good many of us. She paused. The courtroom seemed to lean forward on a single hinge. Before I rule, she said, I'm going to place one clarifying sentence on the record, so there is no confusion about the foundation of my decision. It will not name operations locations or personnel. It will speak only to the capacity point raised by petitioner. She lifted the top page of the court's copy, scanned a line I knew by heart without ever seeing it on paper, and set it down again. She looked at Mark. "Stand, please," she said. Mark stood because people stand when a judge tells them to. He squared his shoulders like that might help. The judge took off her glasses and set them on the bench. "Listen carefully," she said. The room went still in the way fields go still before a storm. I could hear the court reporters breathing slow and careful so she wouldn't bump her machine with her own ribs. My hands were flat on the table. The coin in my pocket felt heavier than metal. Bench, grain, scuff mark, brass hinge. The judge drew breath to speak. "Sir, your father served undercover for the FBI for 33 years. Judge Morales said it plain like a measurement. Not loud, not soft. The words landed and stayed. A coffee lid somewhere clicked as it relaxed. No one moved. Mark's mouth opened and closed once like he'd lost his line. Kara's thumbs froze above her phone. The reporter's pen stopped mid-scratch. Buddy in the second row nodded once small, like a man counting cadence to himself. The judge slid her glasses back on. "The petition rests on the claim that Mr. Whitman never held real work and lacks executive function," she said. "The record contradicts both. We are talking about a person who has managed complex tasks over decades, who today manages medication appointments, finances, transportation, and home safety with reasonable systems for his age. The law requires the least restrictive alternative. A full guardianship would be inappropriate." She looked to Paige. "Anything further that bears on current capacity, counsel?" Paige lifted a page, saw there was nothing left on it that helped her, and set it down. "No, Your Honor." Reed didn't stand. He didn't need to. He capped his pen. "The court denies the petition for guardianship with prejudice," Judge Morales said. "Mr. Whitman remains his own decision-maker." She turned to the clerk. "Please enter an order enjoining any person from changing Mr. Whitman's banking utilities or medical providers without his written consent. Note for the record, the court refers recent withdrawals to the county's Financial Exploitation Review Unit. This is not a finding, it's a safeguard. Parties will cooperate." Paige started, "Your Honor," and then thought better of it. The judge faced Mark. "Mr. Whitman, stand, please." He stood. His tie had inched to one side. "You are not to pressure your father for signatures, access, or control," the judge said. "No durable powers, no listing agreements, no account consolidations until further order. You may visit as invited. If you choose to repair this relationship, do so honestly and off the record, if you do not keep your distance." Mark swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Morales looked at me. "Mr. Whitman, if you want a protective order against harassment, your attorney can file a short motion. I will consider it promptly." "Yes, ma'am," I said. She turned to Shelby. "Ms. Collins, thank you. The record will reflect the court's reliance on redacted summaries solely for capacity." Shelby inclined her head and stayed seated, the briefcase still on her knees, as if it belonged there. The judge stacked the exhibits, squared their corners, and spoke to the room more than to the parties. "Guardianship is a blunt instrument," she said. "It is not a shortcut for family disagreements or a way to paper over embarrassment about a parent's work history. Petition denied. Costs to petitioner." She tapped the gavel once. It wasn't theatrical. It sounded like wood on wood. "All rise," the bailiff said, and we did. The judge stepped off the bench. The room took a breath it had held too long. The reporter eased out, already thumbing her phone. A man in the gallery whispered, "Well, I'll be," and caught himself, hat in both hands. Kara gathered her tote bag like it had gotten heavier. Mark's lawyer put a hand on his sleeve. He didn't shake it off this time. He just sat. Reed touched 2 fingers to the corner of our stack and gave the smallest smile I've ever seen on a lawyer. "Paper 1, he said. Buddy squeezed past the aisle row and hovered, hat respectful in his hands. "You want to ride to Rudy's," he said like it was any other Thursday. "In a bit," I said. At counsel table, Paige spoke low to Mark. I didn't listen, but I could read the shape of it: next steps, don'ts and do's, things a man hears when things start to cost. Shelby stood without hurry, stepped close enough to be heard, but not to make a scene. "Mr. Whitman," she said, eyes level, "the court handled this exactly right. It wasn't praise, it was a weather report. If you receive calls you don't want, give them to your attorney." She gave Reed a small card. "I'll be around for 10 minutes. "Thank you," Reed said. She left the way she'd come, the doorway swallowing her like it does people who know how to leave. We gathered our things. The clerk slid me a stamped copy of the order petition denied cost-taxed referral line in clean print, the injunction about changes. She didn't look up, but her mouth softened the way people's mouths do when they think a thing turned out right. On the way down the aisle, Mark stood in front of me, close enough that I could see where his barber had missed one gray hair at the temple. "Dad," he said, quiet. I waited. He worked his jaw and found a sentence that could stand. "I didn't know." "I know," I said. He nodded like he was agreeing with himself. "I'll make it right with the bank. Those pulls. It wasn't—" He stopped. "I'll make it right." "That's between you and the review unit now," I said. "Do what they tell you." Kara hovered just behind him, eyes bright with something that might have been shame and might have been anger. "We were trying to help," she said, like reciting from a file. "Then help," I said, "not like this." Mark looked at the floor. "Can I come by Sunday?" "Maybe," I said. "Call first." He nodded. "I'll call." Buddy's hand was on my shoulder then. "Hot dog still sounds good," he said, which is how friends say, "That's enough of that." In the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed a little higher as if the building were settling too. A vending machine clunked someone's change. The reporter waited by the door and asked if I had a comment. "Just a dad," I said. She wrote it down like it mattered. Reed tucked the stamped order into a Redwell and handed me a clean copy. "Take this to your bank," he said. "Make them scan it, then put it on your fridge under a strong magnet." "I've got one shaped like a walleye," I said. "Perfect," he said. We pushed through the heavy doors into the gray afternoon. The flag out front moved a little and then stopped. Across the street, the WTOL van's door slid shut. A man in a neon vest blew leaves into another neat pile just to watch the wind give him something to do again. Buddy jingled his keys. "You driving or am I?" "I'll drive," I said. "I like to park where I can see the door." He gave me a sidelong look and didn't comment because he is a man who knows when not to. We crossed to the lot. I could feel the coin in my pocket warm now, not heavy. I could feel the order in my other hand, smooth paper with raised seal, the kind you can hold up to the light and see the county through it. At the truck, Reed tapped the roof. "Next steps," he said. "We'll file a short protective order, keep the phone quiet for a while. You'll get a letter from the review unit. Answer what they ask, no more. If Mark calls and keeps to weather and church and how the Buckeyes look, answer back. If he asks for signatures, you hang up." "I can do that," I said. He nodded, then gave me a look a little like the one he gave the first day when he said judges love boring. "You did fine," he said. Buddy and I pulled out of the lot and rolled toward Rudy's Hot Dogs. The radio gave the headlines, "Rain by Saturday, gas up a few cents sports talk about third downs." The courthouse in the rear view got small, the way big things do when you move away from them at the right speed. At the red light, a text buzzed from an unknown number. "Mr. Whitman, Review Unit. We'll be in touch next week. No action needed today." I put the phone face down on the seat and watched the light change. Buddy cracked his knuckles, then stopped himself because his wife says it makes him sound like a walking knothole. He grinned anyway. "You hungry?" he said. "Always," I said. We pulled in under the red sign. Inside the counter, girl knew my order. Mustard onions, no relish. I ate standing up because the stools were taken, and I've never minded being on my feet when things are finished. On the way out, a man held the door and said, "Good on you," without telling me what he'd heard or where. I said much obliged and meant it. Back home, I slid the court order under the walleye magnet and pressed until it bit the metal. I turned the radio off, set the coin on the table, and finally let my shoulders drop. The house sounded the way it does in late afternoon fridge motor or car passing a far dog. I washed my hands and scrubbed the mustard off my thumb. I checked the stove knobs out of habit and smiled when I found them all at 0 like they always are. The voicemail light on the kitchen phone blinked. I let it blink. It could sit there a while. Some things you hurry, some things you let cool before you touch them. The voicemail blinked all evening like a small lighthouse that didn't know when to quit. I let it. After dark, I made a grilled cheese, the way Evelyn taught me low heat more butter than you think flip once, and ate it at the sink because the plate was already there. I rinsed the pan and left it to dry. The court order on the fridge looked calmer under the walleye magnet than it had in my hand. I slept like a man who'd put a heavy box down. In the morning, there was a letter from the county review unit. Plain envelope windowed, county seal in blue. "We have opened a routine review. Please do not be alarmed. Our office may contact you and the petitioner for statements. The date was yesterday. The letter smelled faintly of whatever paper smells like when someone feeds it through a machine that seals and stacks and spits. I tucked it in a folder marked bank and slid the folder behind the phone book I don't need anymore but keep anyway. By Friday, life looked like itself. I mowed. The line trimmer thread jammed and I talked it into unwinding like I always do. A kid on a scooter went by wearing a helmet the color of a lime, and I gave him room on the sidewalk because he was new to steering. The mail lady waved. She'd heard something you can tell by the weight of a wave, but she kept it polite. I changed the porch light bulb and wrote porch bulb on a list just so I could cross it off. Saturday brought rain like the news said. I made chili with too many beans and ate it with a sleeve of saltines while the Buckeyes game muttered on the radio. I listened to the first half because that's when I can still believe both teams might be saints if they tried. At halftime, I turned it off and lay down on the couch and didn't mean to sleep, but I did. Sunday, I ironed a shirt with a clean collar and went to St. Paul's Lutheran. The sanctuary smelled like lemon oil and old paper like always. The same woman who plays the organ played the organ. Pastor Lemke preached a sermon about the two sons, neither one getting it right the first time. He said grace is a door you don't have to kick. I didn't go sharp with the metaphor. I sat and stood and sat and said the words when it was my turn. After the service, Ruth from the second pew asked if I was all right. I told her I was. Carol from the UPS store shook my hand like we'd done business, and it went well. Buddy and I stood by the coffee urn and the styrofoam cups and talked about nothing for a while, which is how men test if the world still fits. The donut holes went fast because the teenagers got there first. I didn't expect Mark and he didn't come. I figured he was visiting a different God that morning, one who wore a necktie and answered emails on Sundays. Back home, there were 2 voicemails and a text. One voicemail from the review unit reminding me they'd call Tuesday to schedule a time. One from Mark halting, then rushed. The text was just, "Can we talk today?" I sat at the table with the phone in my hand and the court order in my sightline and thought about whether a good fence keeps people safe on both sides or just makes it clear where people shouldn't step. I typed 2 p.m. Pearson the picnic tables by the pond and hit send. He read it in less time than it takes a percolator to clear its throat. I got there early. Ducks picked at the smartweed along the edge, and a boy threw bread at them even though the sign told him not to. A woman in a baseball cap jogged by and said, "How you doing?" without looking. The wind was light. My jacket zipper didn't lie flat, and I thought about taking pliers to it later and then decided to live with it. Mark came at 2 sharp. He wore a blue suit without a tie and a look people wear when they are about to ask for a second chance at the thing they have already used up. He sat and put both hands on the table and took them off like the wood might burn him. "I'm sorry," he said. The words didn't stick on his tongue. They fell out and landed. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought you just drifted." "I know," I said. He looked out at the pond. The boy's bread made a small raft that 2 ducks climbed and scolded. "You didn't tell me," he said, not like an accusation, more like a map missing a road. "I wasn't supposed to," I said, and I didn't want to be the kind of man who made his son salute his shadow. He flinched at that and then nodded. The withdrawals, he said the words smaller. "I'll make it right. I already called. The review people will tell me what to do. I'll do it." "Good," I said. "Do that." He tapped the table with a finger, then stopped tapping because he was trying to change the parts of himself that tap instead of listen. "Kara's mad," he said. "At herself, at me, at you. Mostly me." "I don't have room for anybody's anger right now," I said. "Mine included." He swallowed. "We were scared," he said. "Scared of time, of losing you, of... I don't know, of the bills. I made it into control because control looks like care on paper." He looked at me. "It's not." "No," I said, "it's not." "I said some things I can't unsay," he said. "Yes," I said. He looked down into his lap like there might be an answer there. "What do you want me to do?" 3 things I said because I'd written them down and rehearsed them to myself. 1, you talk to the review unit and follow their instructions. You don't cut corners and you don't sweeten. 2, you don't ask me to sign anything. Not a power of attorney, not a listing agreement, not a postcard. If I want to sign something, I'll show you what it is after I sign it. 3, if you call, you talk about church and weather and how the Buckeyes look. If you try to steer into money or control, I'll hang up. If you come by, you knock. If I say not today, you try again another day and you don't make it about your feelings." He nodded while I talked, not like a salesman agreeing, but like a man taking instructions he meant to carry. "Okay," he said. "Okay. And one more thing," I said. "You don't fix your apology by telling people you meant well. You said what you said. You did what you did. Let it be what it was and then be different." He let out a breath. "Okay," he said again, quieter. "I can be different." We sat. The pond didn't make a sound big enough to cover anything. He looked older to me in that minute, and younger both. He put his hands back on the table and left them there. "Did Mom know?" he said. "Enough," I said. She knew the part that mattered. He stared at the water and blinked like the air had grit in it. "I miss her," he said. "Me too," I said. A man with a straw hat walked by with a plastic bag of cans. He stopped and tipped his hat without reasons. We tipped back. After a while, Mark stood, and so did I. He hugged me fast like someone who didn't want to start something he couldn't finish. He stepped back. "Sunday dinner," he said. "Not this Sunday, someday." "Call first," I said. He nodded and walked away with his hands in his pockets, the suit hanging wrong, because suits hang wrong when your head is full. I stayed a few minutes, then headed to the VFW. On the way, I stopped at the grocery and bought 24 donuts, because if you bring a man one donut, he thinks about it. And if you bring a dozen, he thinks about the man who brought them. At the hall, Buddy and 3 others were playing euchre with more jokes than cards. I set the donuts down and pushed the box open toward them. Buddy looked at the coin on the table, waiting for my hand. I took it out of my pocket and set it in his palm. "For the next kid," I said. He closed his fingers and put it back in his pocket like he'd never let it out. "There's always a next kid," he said. We ate donuts and talked about not much until the hour turned over. On the way out, I held the door for Mrs. Donnelly, who wears a red coat every winter, because it makes her feel like she's still in the parade. She said my name like it had 2 syllables, and both were kind. Back home, the house looked like itself again. I pulled the grill out from under the tarp and knocked a spider out of the lid. I lit the burner, and the first hiss made me ready to listen to something simple. I put on burgers and sliced a tomato and decided the lettuce looked like it would keep for one more day. A neighbor leaned over the fence and said the game went our way. I said I had faith in the second half. He said, "Go Bucks," and went back to his yard. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. It was the review unit again, confirming Tuesday. Then a call from a number I knew and didn't know, one of Mark's clients, the kind who says sir when he wants something and doesn't when he doesn't. I didn't pick up. That wasn't my weather to check. I ate on the back steps because the steps are a table if you put your plate on your knee. The burger had just enough char. The tomato was more skin than meat this late in the summer, but it did its job. The sun got low enough to make the lawn look like someone had thrown a green blanket over a sleeping dog. A train horn sounded a long way off and then again closer the second time, like it had changed its mind. When the light went, I turned off the grill and then checked it again, because I always do. Inside, I wrote "call review unit" on a sticky note and stuck it to the edge of the fridge where the walleye magnet couldn't bully it. I washed the plate and the fork and set them to dry. I put the pillbox out for the week and said the days under my breath, not because I needed to, but because saying them makes a little rhythm in a quiet room. Before bed, I stood by the front window and watched the street be what it is. Porch light across the way, a cat working the edges of the hedge, a teenager on a bicycle he should have put away earlier. My mailbox leaned a little left. I thought again about fixing it and thought again about leaving it because it pointed just enough toward the house to look like it knew where it belonged. I don't know if Mark will call on a Sunday and if I'll say yes. I don't know if Kara will learn how to be gentle or if she'll just be quiet because a judge told her to. I know the review unit will do their job and I'll answer what they ask and nothing more. I know work is work, whether anybody claps, and that a man can live a whole life in plain sight and be missed by the people closest to him because he kept his word to people farther away. Revenge, if that's what we're calling it, wasn't the gavel or the line about 33 years. It was the daylight. It was the public record that says he managed. He kept his house. He paid what he owed. He told the truth when asked. It was the look on my son's face when he realized the story he'd made up didn't fit around a fact that didn't ask permission to exist. I turned off the living room lamp, The house held the quiet the way a good hand holds a tool, firm, not tight. I went to the back door and checked the lock, and then checked it again, and then smiled because I knew I would. In the bedroom, I put the coin on the dresser and then thought better and put it back in my pocket where it belonged until I found the next kid. Some work you can't brag about, some love you don't say out loud. Either way, if you do it steady, it holds.